Now that you've saved your lesson settings, you're ready to create lesson content. Your version in Moodle may be slightly different than what you see here. I'm using version 2.7 for this video. The first thing you need to do is to open up your lesson. This brings you to the content pages. Just as it's possible to import and export questions between quizzes in Moodle courses, it's also possible to import questions directly into your lesson from your computer or from a question bank within a Moodle course. As long as you're using the correct file format, most types of questions can be imported in a lesson. Importing lessons can be a bit of a complex process, however, and it will be addressed in a separate video. A cluster typically contains question pages, such as multiple choice, which are presented randomly to each student who does the lesson. If you're happy with your learners to see each question page in the same order, then you don't need clusters. Clusters can also be considered another advanced feature of lesson creation, and I'll not be using clusters in this video either. The two main types of pages in a lesson are the content and the question page. The content page is a page where a teacher can provide information to move the lesson forward, but without requiring the student to answer specific questions. The student sees the page title, some information, and then one or more buttons at the bottom to select from. Content pages are not scored. Let's look at an example of a content page from a different course. This is an example of a content page from an English 8 grammar lesson that's already been created. Notice that the student has some information on the topic, and then he's asked to click on one of the buttons at the bottom of the page. Lessons can easily be created without using content pages, but content pages can be a good way of organizing your information. Let's go back to our original lesson now. The question page can also provide information to the student, but similar to a quiz, the student is asked to complete a question from a variety of question types. Most of your lesson will probably be made up of question pages. In this video, I will be creating a short lesson on color theory. This lesson will provide examples of each question type and will also include a content page. Let's begin with a content page. First, we will begin by putting in a title. In this case, I'll use color theory because that is the topic of the lesson. Now, you need to fill in the content page information. Notice that you have the same editing capabilities as you do on most pages of Moodle. This is a video on how to create a lesson, and my pages will be very simple, and I'll not be going through each of the editing features available. But keep in mind that you can make your page look pretty much any way that you like, with options to insert a picture, links, audio, but let's just type in some simple notes for now. Now we have some basic information and also directing students to the first button that they're going to be asked to click on. You are given the options of arranging your content buttons horizontally and or displaying them in the left menu on the side. I'm going to take that one off. Now you need to enter the information for your content. The number of content selections that you see will depend on the number of answers that you determined in your lesson settings. If you find you don't have enough, you can change the number in your lesson settings. Your content names will be the names of the buttons at the bottom of your content page. So let's call this one the color wheel. You will most likely want to stick to Moodle auto format. However, if you're comfortable, you do have some options, such as HTML language. The jump is one of the most crucial parts of your lesson. It tells the lesson where to send the student next. If your lesson is not functioning the way you want it to, check your jumps, because this is often where an error can occur. A bit of a note here. Some people find it easier to create their question pages first, and then go back and create their content page. This is because at this point, you haven't created any question pages to set your jump to. I prefer to create my content page first, and then I will go back and change my jumps here. For now, I'll just leave the jump as it is. My second content page name is Color Schemes. So I just typed that in, and I'm going to leave that jump alone as it is. For this simplified lesson, I only need the two content buttons, so I can go to the bottom of the page now and save. You will see you have a lot of options at the top of your page now. You can preview the lesson. You can get a report once there have been lesson attempts. You can go directly to your essay questions if you have any for grading purposes. You'll see here that there's no essay questions found in the lesson yet. Let's go back to the edit. In edit mode, you have several options. You can view your lesson in expanded mode, which gives you all the details of every page. Or you can view your lessons in collapsed mode, if you're just looking at your titles, question types, jumps, and actions. Let's stay in expanded mode for now. You can see that I have the 4 creation options that we saw on the initial page. I can import questions, I can add a cluster, add a content page, or add a question page before and after the page that I just created. Now look at the function buttons here. We have a move icon if you want to change the order of your questions. We have an edit icon. This is a preview icon, so you can see the question as a student would see it, and this lets you delete your question if you like. When you are editing a page, you need to be in the edit mode for the lesson, and you also need to click on the edit for the individual page. Now that I have my content page, I'm going to add a question page. You have question type options that are similar to what you would see in a quiz activity. So let's start with the multiple choice question by adding a question page. I had 2 subtopics in my content page, color wheel and color scheme. I need to keep this in mind as I create my questions. My first questions will be on the color wheel. I will continue to keep my information really brief, but remember that you have full editing options on your question page, so you can make it as intricate as you like. So let's open up a question, multiple choice, add the page. I'm going to title my question page Color Wheel 1. Here is some basic content. Now you have to ask your question. If you click this box, you're indicating that there's more than one correct answer to your question. In this case, I only have one correct answer. This is where you put in your answers. Here's a hint for you. I always put my correct answer first, and I'll tell you why in just a second. My correct answer for this question is orange. Again, you have the option of changing your format if you like. Most times you'll want to use Moodle Auto Format. If you previously selected Use Default Feedback in your lesson settings, you can leave this blank. If you choose to put in some feedback, you can do that too, and your feedback will override the default feedback. Here is your jump. This is why I put my correct answer first. Remember that you need to tell the lesson where to send your learner, depending on his answer. For a correct answer, you will most times send the learner to the next page. Next page is the default setting for the first answer of every one of the question modes. So if you make your first answer your correct answer, you don't have to change the settings. Similarly, you don't have to change the scoring, because the default setting for the first answer, the correct answer, is 1. Now I'll fill in the rest of my answers. Answer 2 is an incorrect response, so I'm typing in red. Again, you don't need to put in any feedback if you've clicked the default feedback in your lesson settings. Notice that the jump is defaulted to this page. That means that the student will be directed back to the same page to try the question again. Notice also that the student will not receive a point for his incorrect response. Let's quickly fill in the other two incorrect responses. Blue and yellow. Now you just have to go to the bottom and save your page. Let's preview this question so you can see what it looks like. So here's the question and preview. Let's click on an incorrect answer so you can see the default feedback and the jump. When the student clicks continue, they will be directed back to the same page. So let's try that again, and this time let's go with the correct answer. Notice that the default feedback is that's the correct answer, and when you press continue this time, you're going to actually go to the end of the lesson, because that is our last lesson so far, or our last page in our lesson so far. So let's now go back to editing the lesson. Click on Edit, brings us to our lesson page again. Now I'm going to change my view now to a collapsed view, so there'll be less scrolling required. Now let's add another type of question for the color wheel subtopic. Here's where we add our question. And this time, let's do a matching question. I'll call this question Color Theory 2, or Color Wheel 2, sorry. That will make my organization much easier. Now I'm going to add the contents for the page and the question. You don't really need to change this information unless you want to change the defaults. Let's open it up anyways. You can leave it blank and use the default settings, and the jump and the score are already set for you. Since that is a correct response, the jump is to the next page and the score is 1. The incorrect response would be this page with a score of 0. If you want to put in your own feedback, you certainly can do that, and it will override the default feedback. Now you need to input the question material. This is my correct answer. That matches with answer green. Now we just save the page. Let's try this page now so you can see what it looks like. Click on the preview. There it is. Let's go back to Edit and put in another type of question. Add a question page. And this time, let's try true or false. Let's put in a title. We're still working under our color wheel subtopic from our content page, and some content. We need to include a question, and it's interesting that the true and false question can be a traditional true or false, or it can just be a choice between two answers. For example, if my question is, not really a question, if my statement is the complement of orange is blue, my answers would be either true or false, with true being, in this case, the correct response, and false the incorrect response. However, I can also make my question something like this. the complement of orange is, and then my correct answer could be, and my incorrect answer would be any other color that I wanted. Your jumps and your scores should be correct as long as you put your correct answer in the correct response spot. Okay, so let's save that page. Let's have a quick look at it. There you go. And let's go back to edit. Okay, now I'm going to create a question for my second subtopic in my contact page, which was color scheme. You'll notice that there is an option to create a numerical question. A numerical question looks just like a short answer question. The difference is that numerical answers are allowed to have an accepted error. This allows a fixed range of answers to be evaluated as one answer. For example, if the answer is 30 with an accepted error of 5, then any number between 25 and 35 will be accepted as correct. I won't be creating a numerical question for this lesson. My next question type will be short answer. Now I want to indicate that this is a question for my second subtopic, color scheme. So I'm going to put that in the title, just for my own reference. Now, the content page. And the question is, short answer questions can be tricky because it's nearly impossible to input all the possible correct answers that a student might type in, especially if more than a single word is required. If you click this option, it enables you to use coding symbols to make a wider range of responses acceptable. However, that's a video in itself, so we won't be looking at it here. In a lesson, to allow students to progress smoothly, I prefer to handle short answer questions this way. For a correct answer, which remember is your first one, I put in this symbol. With that symbol in place, anything that the student types will move them to the next page. And then, in the response feedback, I put in the answer that I was looking for. Now let's save this page to show you how this works. The page is saved. Let's preview it. That's what the question looks like. Now a student could type in anything here. However, when a student submits a response, they are given the answer to the question, and they're asked to check their own work. I find that that is very useful for having students practice the information without slowing them down by having to wait for me to answer the longer questions. Now let's move on to the final question type, which is an essay. I try to stay away from essay questions because they require teacher grading, and as I said before, I like the students to be able to move through lessons independently without waiting for me to mark things. However, let's see what an essay question might look like. Basically, you just need a title and content. There is only one jump to the next page because the question requires the teacher to mark it. You may want to change the scoring, make this question worth a bit more, and then save. And let's see what the student would see. Notice that the essay type of question requires students to type in a longer answer. And when we submit, the student submits the answer, this is what they'll see. It shows them their answer, and it tells them that the essay will be graded by the teacher. Let's go back to the lesson. So now that we have some questions, let's go back to the content page and fix the jumps. So this was our content page. Let's edit it. When students click the first button on the content page, Content 1, I want them to go to the first color wheel question. So that's where my jump needs to go. So you'll notice when I click here now that there is the option to go to color wheel number 1. When students click the second button on the content page, I then want them to go to the first color scheme question. That is why you want to label your questions really clearly. That's it. Now I save the page. There's one more jump that we have to indicate now that all the questions are completed. At the end of the color wheel questions, I want to direct the students back to the content page so they can click on the color scheme button. So to do this, I need to edit that jump in the final color wheel question, which was color wheel number 3. So let's go in there. So now, a correct response for this question will not take them to the next page. It will take them back to the content page. And save. This lesson should be good to go now, so let's try it out. Here's our content page. First, I'd like them to click on the color wheel. There's the first color wheel question. Correct answer was orange. Tells them they're correct. They hit continue. There's the second one. Let's make this one incorrect, see what happens. It should tell them they're incorrect and direct them back to the same page again. So let's get it correct this time. Submit. Tells them they're correct. Here's our third color wheel question. The complement of orange is blue. Submit. That's correct. And now, that was the end of our color wheel questions, so now we're back to the content page. Now they click this button. Here is our first color scheme question. I'm not really going to put in a good answer here, but it doesn't matter, because when the student submits, they're given the answer and they're asked to check it. I find that students do tend to put in their best answer, and this way they can see if they're on the right track. Here's our essay answer. Submit. And continue. Now you can see that the student has reached the end of the lesson, and they're provided with a few links. They can either return to the original course or they can view their grades. Well, that's the basics of creating a lesson in Moodle version 2.7. Thanks for watching.